Yo, what is going on YouTube? My name is Bishop. I am currently an Ascendant 4 player in Deadlock, and I am here to teach you guys the fundamentals of movement from the basics all the way to the advanced techniques so that you can move around like this.
If I got it, running on a feeling, thought I knew I forgot it. Neck against the ceiling, wear a suit if I got it. Tied up for a minute, couldn't prove I was drowning.
I sent them a location, I paid for the vacation,
I can't ever show face shit, I sent them a location, Falling when it's silent, silent when I'm falling, call it undecided. I might quit, ain't no pain, I'm gonna die in my wrist, in a lie, I won't spend all my money on some shit.
Now, before we start flying around the map, let's get into the basics or the fundamentals of movement. Okay, so starting with the super basic stuff, let's get into the baseline move speed that every character has. You can see it here on the hero selection screen. You can see that Paradox has a 6.6 base move speed per second. Each character has a different one. Not all of them are completely different, but you see that the base move speed varies from character to character. You can see here some people have move speed that scales with stats, but that's your baseline. You're always moving at that speed unless you're actively shooting at the time. While you're just running around, this is your base, how you're moving around the map. So for example, I'll show you Paradox. She has a 6.8 movement speed. The speed that I'm currently running around at is my basic walking speed. After walking, it's the next thing to talk about is probably going to be sprinting. Sprinting is a state that you achieve after not damaging or taking damage for 5 seconds. So if I change hero, I can go to Bebop, who has base sprint speed, which again you can see here. Move speed, sprint speed. I have 3 meters per second sprint speed. So you'll see in the bottom left, 9.6 meters per second I'm moving. You'll also see these little lines following behind your character. See the lines trailing behind me. That is the indicator that you're actively sprinting. There's no buttons pressed. You just need to not have done damage or taken damage in the last 5 seconds. You'll see after 5 seconds, I will go back to 9.6 movement speed. So after sprinting, the next thing to talk about is probably going to be stamina or rolling or dashing, whatever you want to call it. Dashing and rolling is done by pressing left shift by default. You have 3 stamina bars depending on the character. Some characters have less, some characters have more. Ivy, for example, is a character that has 4 stamina, as you can see by the bars here. So she can spam her roll 4 times. You can see some heroes only have 2, like McGinnis and Vindicta only have 2 stamina at default. No, they do not recharge faster. They are the same cooldown for everybody unless you buy a specific item like extra stamina. Next we'll cover crouching. So crouching is just by pressing control. You will crouch down, your model will get a little smaller, your head hitbox will move. This has a cooldown on spamming it, so if you spam crouch a lot, you will note that your move speed gets heavily penalized, and then you'll accelerate back to your standard speed. That's only if you're heavily spamming crouch. Now, crouch is very good on certain characters because the characters like Wraith have a much more noticeable crouch. Their head moves a lot more, so doing a little mix in with your crouch movement is very good while strafing, to make sure you're not getting shot in the head so consistently. Past crouching in the beginner section and the basic sections, there is mantling. So if you walk up to any object with a lip here, you can hold spacebar while looking at it and you will climb on top of it. Now an important thing to note is that while you're climbing, you can get meleeed and it will stun you out of it. Also, if you want to not mantle something, you have to be looking away from it. If I'm looking at it close enough with a 90-degree angle, you will mantle. So even if you're slightly to the side here, you will mantle pretty quickly, and this can ruin some more momentum-based movement strings you'll learn later on. So that is about it for the very basic ground level mechanics that you need to understand to just start playing the game. Let's get into some more intermediate understanding things, and we're going to start that off by talking about sliding. So sliding is a technique that you can use by crouching with a certain amount of momentum. Will transfer that into a slide. So by default, if you are running above 10 meters per second, you can enter a slide at any point in time just by pressing crouch. As long as you're running at 10 meters per second, you can enter a crouch. That includes the speed you gain from rolls, so you can slide out of rolls as well. A very important and helpful thing to know. In general, when you're sliding out of your rolls, you want to be timing it at the end, so you're not canceling your momentum. You can see that I get all the way to 30 there by waiting towards the end. If I were to immediately crouch, I don't quite make it all the way. You're going to lose that momentum from your roll if you crouch too early. You really want to make sure you're waiting to finish the end of your roll and then crouch to get the maximum distance. The main concept to know is that you will lose speed while sliding unless you're going downhill. If you're going downhill, you will maintain your speed for a good bit more time. You can also activate a slide going downhill no matter what speed you're currently going. So if you're on a slope and you're holding forward, you can slide. If you're going backwards, you can slide backwards. As long as there is an active slope near you, you are able to slide freely as long as you're going downward. Okay, let's take a moment to talk about more of a functional mechanic behind movement rather than an actual technique or something you can do. Let's talk about friction and air friction. Now, in this game, there is a set amount of friction that will decelerate you no matter what, whether you're in the air or you're on the ground. Right, so for example, if I come off the zip and I slide, you'll see that I will decelerate because I'm sliding into the ground. This can be avoided with some more advanced techniques that I'll go over later, but the basic idea is that there is a set amount of air friction. If you're jumping off a zip, you'll see that I slow down. See that I eventually drop down and I'm slow. There are techniques to avoid this. A little teaser for later. There are ways to reduce air friction very heavily, which I will go over later, but just know that you are going to slow down. Strafing in the air, which is holding a left or right key, as long as you are actively moving, you do fight against friction slightly. But the main thing to note is that when you slide on the ground, you are increasing your friction, especially every time you leave the ground. You are going to eventually hit that friction that will stop you from moving. Okay. Now we are going to get into a technique called dash jumping. This is an intended mechanic that is clearly taught in the game. I'm going to show you what it looks like. That's your basic dash jump. The basic principle behind it is that you are rolling. You will note that your stamina flashes blue for a moment. When you see that flash, you are going to press spacebar. This will use 2 stamina, but you get a much faster acceleration and you do have less air friction after jumping for a brief moment after doing a dash jump. That's why it's just very good to know. There's also items that make this very good, like if you get the item Kinetic Dash, this will cause your next dash jump to not consume a stamina. So you get essentially 1 free stamina with this technique, and then you get like a benefit of faster fire rate and ammo. You see the item proc there. But I'm going to turn on the stamina again. This technique is an absolute must-know. You have to know this because you can dash jump into 2 slides to cover quite a bit of distance. Very helpful for running away or closing a distance if you have nowhere else to be going. Also very nice because you can time your shooting in the slides to save the ammo. Very useful. As well as if you are on height, if you roll off something, you can still dash jump. So you don't have to be grounded the entire time as long as your first roll starts from the ground. Very useful, very bread and butter technique that will be your most commonly used form of stamina to just move around as long as you're not using zipline movement, which again we'll get into later. Okay, I want to go back a second to talk about a little more in depth about rolling, specifically about how to cancel your roll or your dash. So you'll see that if I dash here and I mash parry, the parry does not come out until I reach the end of the dash animation. Same way that I cannot roll again while I'm in the middle of the animation. I can chain them together, but I can't really interrupt it immediately. Now there are 2 ways, and they're different, to cancel your roll. I'll talk about the first one, the one I use most of the time, which is just a simple roll cancel. Now while you're rolling, you can press crouch. You'll notice that your character will do a small jump, as you can see there. This will allow you to parry much faster. As soon as you have pressed crouch, you are able to parry. You are not, however, able to roll again after you cancel like that. So after you do the crouch, you'll note that you're still locked out of rolling until that little bounce is over. Now, you can avoid this lockout if you start your roll from a crouch. If you crouch into roll, there's no limit. Once you've uncrouched in the middle of your roll, you can immediately re-roll or parry. So I can immediately do a very fast parry with this. This is a bit harder to do technically. I use my pinky on control to hold it. I still press shift, and then I release control, and then I re-press shift. So you can do like 2 dodges like this really quickly, or you can quickly parry. It is harder to do, but it is much faster than just pressing control, because it does, again, that bounce does limit you from doing other rolls, other dashes, other movement options. Okay, another quick thing to talk about in the intermediate section is going to be strafe dashing. Now, normally when you're in the air and you dash forward, this is just a standard air dash, or whatever you want to call it. I think most people refer to it as an air dash. You'll see that here, if I air dash forward, I am a little short of the 10 meter. Now, there's something interesting that happens when you dash at a slight angle. So if I'm holding W and A or W and D when I air dash, there is actually something very interesting in that it retains momentum a little bit better, and it cancels your air friction just a little bit longer. So comboing a diagonal dash out of your movement often will travel a bit further. There's something about the diagonal dash, I believe it is related to the air friction, that causes it to be a bit better. So if you can like line yourself up with dashing diagonally, you'll see that I'll go much further than the 10 line. If instead of diagonal I look to the right and dash diagonally, I'm going to go much further than I would if I were to just be going straight. Not much further, right? It's obviously, only a few meters, but we're trying to rack up every nickel and dime we can. So to chain together all that movement, knowing that strafe dashing does take you a little bit farther is good to know. Okay, let's get into the final part of the intermediate section. Let's talk about everybody's favorite wall jumps. Now, wall jumps are a pretty standard basic movement tech. What it requires is that you are pressing away from a wall. So if I walk up to a wall and I hold S and then I jump while my character is making contact with the wall, I will perform a wall jump. Now, an important thing to note is that a lot of surfaces are mantleable, such as this sign here, and I will mantle it automatically. So to avoid the mantle, I have to make sure I'm looking away from the surface that is mantleable. And by looking away, I won't be able to mantle, but I will still be able to wall jump. If I'm looking at this and I try to press S, it will mantle me every time. But if I jump and look away, I can then wall jump without being forced to mantle. It's just important to note that you do have to be, pressing the opposite direction of the wall and kind of with the momentum you're going. So you'll see that here I'm just holding S because just looking slightly offset enough is enough to give you that wall bounce. Or that wall jump, whatever you want to call it. Wall bounce, wall jump, there's no correct perfect term, but this is a very fun movement technique you can do. You can also maintain some momentum from punching while you travel vertically. So after you wall jump, if you punch and look upwards, pretty much immediately after you leave the wall, you will still maintain your vertical momentum as you're charging the punch. You can get to some higher places, you can get to some nice mantle spots. This in general, very helpful to know. If you need to get up somewhere, like say here, you don't have the stamina to get up over this lip. I don't want to be able to, I can't just double jump up. I've used all my stamina running away, so being able to wall jump melee over to the lip is super nice and helpful to get to certain places, like climbing this middle pillar is much easier if I'm doing wall jump into punch, and you can see that I'm on top with no stamina burnt. So very good technique to know to get around, especially breaking around, lips and height, getting around the vertical axis of the map. Wall jump is super important, very helpful to know.
This isn't your average everyday movement. This is advanced movements. Hey!
Alright, we have made it to the advanced section of the movement guide. Now, let's talk about ziplines. So, the main thing that you guys need to understand is zipline movement conservation, or ZMC for short. The basis of this movement tech is there is two different ways to dismount from the zipline. You can jump off the zipline by pressing spacebar, or you can crouch off the zipline by pressing control. When you crouch off the zipline, air friction is entirely removed for 2 full seconds. So if you crouch off the zipline and immediately do a strafe dash, which we talked about earlier, a dash with the W and A or W and D direction, you get an insane amount of acceleration, which you can turn into slides, all that good stuff. Now, another thing I want to talk about really quickly while we're going over this is b-hopping. If you've played any other movement games, you know that if you jump right before you hit the ground, you're just limiting the time that you're touching the ground, which means you'll have less friction overall. Again, another way to keep your momentum is b-hopping and slides. You can alternate them as they have different amount of air friction and different triggers for air friction. Good thing to know. But the main thing that we're talking about is the zipline movement conservation. So crouching off that zipline is going to give you a complete removal of your air friction. You will then do a strafe dash. That is going to send you flying very quickly, which, as you can see, is a big fundamental part of the movement in the game. So once you understand this, you should almost always be crouching off ziplines, and then you can learn to chain it with other things like wall bounces, other kinds of movement, all that sort of good stuff. So for example, like I can chain it here, hit a wall bounce, and now we're all the way up onto the roof over here. So this can be kind of chained together to form a lot of insane rotations around the map. It really lets you move around pretty freely and get to a lot of places where you really couldn't unless you knew the technique. Just a very good thing to know overall. Very useful. A lot of spots to use this on. There's this particular rotate over here on church. They call this church boost. Another thing I want to talk about before I show this boost is the way what you're exactly doing while you cancel this. Now, as you see, I go up to the zip lines. You'll see a little spark appear on my character, right? That's when I am actually being pulled quickly to the zip line. If you cancel before this, you can't, right? So you're locked in until that spark. So what you're trying to do is, as the zipline pulls you, the acceleration increases. So you're trying to cancel right as it picks up in the middle there, pulling you to the zipline. Which the best visual for is that little pink spark that you see, or the color of the spark, right covering my character. As I grab it, I'll slow it down for you guys or zoom in post. But you'll see kind of right on my character, a little spark effect pops up. That is when you can actually release the zipline with control, and that is the timing you should be looking for most of the time. This whole movement stems from the two mechanics of, one, you are canceling your air friction by crouching off the zipline, and two, you're building the momentum of grabbing the zip and then canceling that with the controlling off the zip. So an example of a spot that this works really interestingly is you can actually mantle this part of Purple Bridge. If I mantle up here and I stand here and I jump and grab this, you can see that I maintain a lot of momentum and can actually even go all the way into the blue lane from here. Now, the reason this functions so differently as a boost is because of the way that I'm able to grab the zipline while standing above it. There's not many places on the map that you can grab the zipline from above it, but when you do, you gain a bit more speed than you normally would. Specifically, too, because of the way that this slant works at church. So if you get a really good one here, let me see if I can get a nice one for you guys. You can get so far from that spot, and it's just a function of knowing the zipline movements. I believe for some reason when you are grabbing onto a zipline from above, the pull is stronger. That's why you get so much momentum from that pink zip boost over there, is because you're going from above. You're so much faster from the initial pull. I think you do have to be grounded though. And one more thing I'll add with the ziplines too is if I don't have fast stamina, you'll see that if I use all my stamina, right? If I re-grab the zipline from the ground, I recharge my stamina. This is to stop people from losing their stamina when they double jump to grab zip. But a quick little trick that a lot of people have been abusing recently is they'll just grab the zip, drop off, grab the zip, drop off, and then boom, your stamina is refilled. So a nice little thing to note for building back your stamina up really quickly. If you've done, a big movement line that needs all the, the tech and all of your stamina, you've used it all, you can hit the ground, grab, drop, grab, drop, and your stamina is back, and you're ready to fly into the lane with all of your movement skills back. So you can kind of reset every time you hit a lane with a zipline to get all your stamina back. I'm not sure if this is intended, but right now this is how it works. This might get changed in the future. Just an important thing to know. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is my personal favorite movement tech in the game, and I think this is kind of the glue that holds together like the really cool advanced movement routes. It is heavy melee cancel. Now, specifically this works a lot better when you buy the melee charge item. So without it, it's a little worse. Heavy melee charge is notably increased with this item, as you can see here. My charge goes much further than without this item. And the way that you use this movement technique is you're actually using items or abilities to cancel the melee and retain the momentum of that charge forward. So for example, Abrams, I can chain together a zipline melee or a zipline momentum conservation into a punch and cancel it with Fleetfoot or my one ability. So Abrams has a default ability to get a heavy melee cancel. He can punch into one, and he keeps all that momentum from the punch, and he can travel very far from it. It's a very nice thing to be able to do, knowing you can do that, You can hit little slide boosts and a bunch of things you can do to get around the map. But the basic idea is that for movement, you're just canceling at the very end of the melee, so you get as much of that forward lunging momentum. You cancel it, you'll get all of that momentum forward, and it's just super nice for finishing out rotations or ending it at an exact spot you want to be on. If you mess up a movement, you can also just do it from a standstill. Say your zipline is gone and you need a way out, you can jump, hold melee, and immediately just slide forward with the heavy melee cancel. I like to wall jump into it to get a little higher. It gets a little nicer once you find a spot to wall jump, then cancel. But it's super nice for getting around the map. It does require a bit of investment though, with having to get the longer melee charge. It's noticeably less impactful if you do not have the melee charge item. Still very doable, especially on characters like Paradox or Abrams, where you're already going to be using heavy melee a lot, and it's just a very fun tech. It makes this rotation much better, especially if you do multiple. You have Fleetfoot and an ability, you can chain them together. Just a very fun movement tech to know and to use overall. It also allows you for some mind game stuff while you're in like the melee interaction, right? If anyone has played fighting games, they're familiar with like rock, paper, scissors interactions in neutral game. You kind of have a similar thing with like parry, right? Where once you get close to someone, they're scared of parry. So you kind of react by seeing them charge, but you can cancel the charge and then re-melee after you have gone at them. So this will very often bait the parry. Right, so you can bait it multiple times. You can bait once, bait twice, bait 3 times. As many layers as you want, as many cancels as you have, as many items or abilities, you can chain them together to bait people and move around the map. Both very fun, both different ways to use the technique, but a notable technique as well. As you can see, if you combine it with some of the other techniques, you can really be flying around the map rather quickly. Obviously I have no cooldowns on, so the rate at which you're able to do this technique is much lower in actual games. But notably, especially from this green lane, I like to take control of buff very often with this technique. And so oftentimes your zip isn't far enough to get out here. So you can do a zip jump here off this wall, and then you get right to the buff very quickly as soon as it spawns from lane or from zip. You have a lot of different things you can do with it. I mean, the options open up a lot, and I'll show some basic routes at the end of this video that I like to use regularly in games. But like the part of the fun is kind of exploring the map and figuring stuff out. So I won't just give you every single route I use. I think the fun of it is learning routes. If you guys want me to do a different video later on, showing like specifically just a bunch of routes, just different ways to get around from lane to lane, or however whatever. Let me know and I can make something else about that later, but for now I want to just keep it mostly about the techniques themselves. I apologize for the flashbang. I just wanted to briefly mention that I will also be linking the movement document where I learned a lot of these techs from. This has a overview of every single technique. Specifically, I wanted to bring up here that characters that can heavy melee cancel, you can see the list here. Abrams can cancel with Siphon Life. Paradox can cancel with Kinetic Carbine. Those are the two that I use the most because those are the characters I play often. But you can see the full list there, and it'll explain kind of all of the techniques in this document, which I will have in the description. Okay, this is going to be the final movement tech we talk about today. Before I do a little bit of an end of video showcase of just some general movement spots around the map, that'll be really helpful to know. Whether they be like combination of the basics, the intermediates. I'm just going to show some movement stuff that I think is beneficial for your game at the end of the video. But for now, let's get into the final tech called corner boosting. So this tech is particularly beneficial on Lash. For any Lash players, this is something you guys are going to be much more... It's going to be much more important that you guys learn this tech than others. So the basic idea is that it's essentially a wall bounce, but you're relying on the small corners of an object to give you a boost in height. So you can, for like a very basic way to do this, you mantle something that is too small to actually mantle. You will fall off the object. And do you notice that when I fall off, I'm looking straight down? You'll see for a moment I bounce on the corner right there. You'll see that I bump into it. What I'm going to do is hold W and jump as I hit that little bump on the sign after mantling. And you'll see that I get a very vertically high wall jump. Now there's easier ways to do this, like you can use this corner here, and you'll see that this gets me very high up. Now this obviously benefits Lash because the damage is increased based on how far you fall during the ability. So I want to show one example here with if you're on a far side lane, someone's up here CSing, or you can use your corner boost off that sign to get up here without having to use a lot of stamina. It's super good. It catches a lot of people off guard. You can hit that higher up with more practice, but I'm not super practiced on this specific one. So but that's the idea right there, is that you're using all that momentum from hitting the corner. It's not as much of a vertical boost, but it's more of a horizontal speed boost. Good to be aware of. Another one here with the barrels. Getting up here, you can corner boost off these. Get a proper one. And get all the way up to the top of the building. So just like mostly it's a tool to access vertical heights, but for certain characters, getting up here as Lash is super great, and then you can hit a zipline, do your tech, all the usual stuff. But definitely important to know. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Please make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe, hit the button, all the good YouTube stuff. I hope you guys learned something and are able to implement some of the stuff I taught you in your everyday gaming. I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'll leave some more movement stuff, like just general routes that I do around the map at the end of the video, just a couple, not a bunch. But if you guys want to see more stuff like that, let me know, and I'll make a kind of a longer video on that.